Now you can start your forklift. When you start it up, realize this is the first start of the day. This is the pre-start check. So the engine's cool. So start it up, let it idle to warm. And while you're doing that, check your lights for operation. Headlights, tail lights, blinkers, reversing light, which means you need to put your foot on the brake and put it into reverse to check the reversing light. And listen for the beep, beep, beep of the reversing warning horn that should be going. Now, if you don't hear the beep, beep, beep when you put it in reverse, you need to report that and you cannot use that forklift. You need to also check the flashing light on top. Is it working, the strobe light? If it's not working, the forklift should not be used. There are items that you need to identify that would stop you using the forklift. For example, an oil leak in the hydraulics would be something serious. But maybe a split in the wall of a tyre, a solid rubber tyre, wouldn't matter so much. But if it was a pneumatic tyre, an air tyre, and it had a split in the side, that would be terrible, or if it was half flat. And so you need to identify all of these things, put them down on your pre-start checklist, and then report them to your supervisor so the supervisor can make a decision on what to do. Now remember to turn the lights off again. So the last thing you want is to come back a little later and find a flat battery. So turn your lights off, you've checked all the lights, everything's operating well. Now check your mast for operation. You're going to lift the forks off the ground. Now here's a hint. It's sometimes difficult to know when the forks are level. And so I find if you lift the tips, which is usually the middle lever on your controls, the first lever would be up and down, push forward for down, pull it back for up. The second lever is the forward and backward tilt of the mast. Push forward, it tilts forward, pull back, it lifts, tilts back. And the third lever on a typical forklift will be side shift. And so you can practice with those. But before you lift the forks off the ground, why don't you take the center lever and lift the tip of the forks about 100 mil off the ground. Then when you raise your forks straight up, you will actually find that they're pretty level. You don't want your forks tilted forward like this when traveling. That's very dangerous. You need to have them at least level, maybe tilted back a bit. And so lift your tips 100 mil before you lift it off the ground. Now test your mast all the way up, all the way back down. Tilt forward, tilt backwards. Make sure that the tilt operations are working well. And side shift, are they working all correctly? And while you're doing that, look for any oil that may come out under pressure from the rams or the hoses, because that would show you that there could be a problem. Drop your load, your forks back down to, I don't know, axle height is probably a good height. And now you're going to test your steering. So you're going to wind the steering from left to right and look over the side and watch the wheels turn. Make sure they're turning freely and correctly. Now place your forklift into gear, handbrake off, forward on the gear stick, push it forward. You're going to roll forward. As it rolls forward, hit the brakes. Now you have 2 brakes on a forklift, or many forklifts, some don't, but on a typical forklift there are 2 brake pedals. The first brake pedal, the one next to your accelerator, is just the same as the brakes in your car. When you put your foot on a tiny bit, it'll slow down a little bit. When you push it on hard, it'll stop more quickly. But the brake under your left foot, the left side brake, is actually what I call a clutch brake. In other words, when you put your foot on that brake, the brakes are applied, but it also disengages the gearbox. And this brake is there for experienced operators. When they pull up at pallet racking and places like that, they'll use that brake so they can raise the mast and give the engine a rev without the forklift lurching forward. But for those of you who are inexperienced, use the brake that's like the car brake. Get used to using it first, and whenever you raise your load, put the gears in neutral and pull the handbrake on so that nothing can go wrong. Get used to raising and lowering loads in a safe situation before you start to use that left-hand clutch brake. But now you're rolling backwards, rolling forwards, testing the brakes to make sure they work properly. Every time you put your forklift into reverse, you must look over your shoulder. Don't just check the mirrors. As soon as your forklift goes into reverse, look over both shoulders to make sure it's safe for you to go back, that someone hasn't walked up there and they're not even thinking. Crouch down to do up a shoelace or something and you reverse straight over them. And so be aware of that. Now, shut your forklift down. Place your forks flat on the ground with the tips forward. Put the handbrake on, put it into neutral, turn the key off, and remove the key. That is your shutdown procedure. We talk more about that later on, but I want you to hear about it now. Forks flat on the ground with your tips forward, handbrake on, gear in neutral, key off, key out. And now when you hop off the forklift, make sure you, again, have those 3 points of contact. In exactly the same way as you climbed on, climb off safely. Don't just leap off. Don't just forget about it. And experienced operators, undo your safety belt. Because you weren't used to wearing one, so often you forget to undo it, and you'll find yourself hanging on the side of the forklift, which is pretty funny, but not what you want to happen. And so that is now how you do a pre-start check. And when do you do a pre-start check? Before you start. Actually, always check everything. Slings, wire ropes, chains, PPE, your personal protective equipment, check it before use. Check it during and after use as well. Check your forklift before use. Everything needs to be checked before you use it.